America and other free and open societies face crucial challenges and opportunities abroad that affect security and prosperity at home. This is a series of conversations with guests who bring deep understanding of today's battlegrounds and creative ideas about how to compete, overcome challenges, capitalize on opportunities, and secure a better future. I am H.R. McMaster. This is Battlegrounds.
On today's episode of Battlegrounds, our focus is on the Democratic Republic of Congo, also known as the DRC. Our guest Djo Munga is an award-winning director, producer, and screenwriter. Munga was born in the DRC's capital, Kinshasa. He pursued fine arts while attending boarding school in Belgium, and a cinema workshop inspired him to attend the National Film School of Belgium, INSAS. Munga then returned to the Congo and established the country's first film and television production company, Suka Productions, as well as its first film and television school. His debut film, Viva Riva, received widespread acclaim. Munga has produced documentary and historical films for the World Bank, BBC, and numerous international development agencies. Roughly 3,000 years ago, agriculturalist communities migrated southward to the present-day Democratic Republic of Congo, establishing powerful kingdoms including Congo, Luba, and Lunda. The Atlantic slave trade was particularly devastating for the Congo Kingdom. From the 16th to 18th centuries, over 5 million Africans were captured from its territories and sent to Brazil. In 1885, Belgian monarch Leopold II seized personal control of the territory, which he called the Congo Free State. Leopold II exploited the region's natural resources, particularly rubber, through brutal forced labor that killed roughly half the Congolese population, an estimated 10 million people. In 1908, the Belgian government formally annexed the territory, renaming it the Belgian Congo, while continuing to exploit it for natural resources. The Democratic Republic of Congo gained independence on June 30, 1960. Patrice Lumumba was elected prime minister, and Joseph Kasavubu was elected president. However, stability was short-lived. The government signed a treaty with Belgium that kept Belgian military officers at their post, but limited Belgium's involvement in the DRC. Days after independence, the Congolese army mutinied against its Belgian commanders. Many Belgians and other Europeans fled the country, and Belgium intervened. The mineral-rich Katanga province seceded. On July 14th, the United Nations ordered Belgian troops to withdraw. On September 5th, President Kasavubu and Prime Minister Lumumba mutually dismissed each other. On September 14th, then Colonel Joseph Mobutu organized a coup d'etat, and the army took power alongside a caretaker government. After 5 years of unrest, then General Mobutu orchestrated another coup and declared himself dictator of the republic, which he renamed Zaire. He also renamed himself Mobutu Sese Seko as he initiated his brutal reign of 32 years. Regional turmoil in the 1990s precipitated two conflicts, known as the First and Second Congo Wars. In 1994, after the plane-carrying Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana was shot down, extremist Rwandan ethnic Hutus committed genocide against ethnic Tutsis and moderate Hutus. The 100-day genocide that killed nearly 1 million Rwandans ended when the Tutsi-led Rwandan Patriotic Front captured Kigali, winning the civil war that started in 1990. Millions of Hutu refugees, including some extremists, fled to Zaire. Under President Paul Kagame, Rwanda and a coalition of African states with security concerns about Mobutu invaded Zaire in 1996. Mobutu fled Kinshasa in 1997, and Kagame-backed opposition leader Laurent Kabila became president. Kabila renamed the country the Democratic Republic of Congo, and in 1998, demanded that previously welcomed Rwandan and Ugandan forces leave the DRC. Rwanda, joined by Uganda and Burundi, then entered into conflict with the DRC a second time, while Angola, Namibia, Sudan, Chad, and Zimbabwe supported the DRC. The conflict, known as the Second Congo War or Africa's World War, resulted in over 3 million deaths from 1998 to 2003. In 2006, Joseph Kabila, who came to power when his father Laurent was assassinated in 2001, won the country's first free election since independence. However, his 2011 re-election was disputed, and youth-led demonstrators called for him to relinquish power in 2015. Kabila's government violently suppressed the protesters as he sought an unconstitutional third term, but he stepped down in 2016. Opposition candidate Felix Tshisekedi became president in 2019, following disputed presidential elections, and was re-elected in 2023. The United States established diplomatic relations with the DRC in 1960. The DRC is the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa, holding an estimated $25 trillion in mineral reserves, including cobalt and copper. The country has vast opportunities but faces intertwined problems of corruption, institutional weakness, humanitarian crises, widespread food insecurity, and armed rebel violence, especially in its mineral-rich eastern regions and the Great Lakes region, where the M23 armed rebel group is expanding territory under its control, and the so-called Allied Democratic Forces are continuing attacks against civilians. Congo has the second largest population of displaced persons after Sudan, and its civilian population is bearing the brunt of war, including death, displacement, sexual violence, health problems, and malnutrition in displacement camps. We welcome Mr. Munga to discuss his films depicting life in the DRC, Central African regional challenges, and opportunities for unleashing the potential of this resource-rich country in service of the long-suffering population.
Djo Munga, welcome. Boti. It's great to have you here, and you know I know you're going to help us learn a lot about the DRC. But first, I want to ask you about how you were drawn to the arts as a way to illuminate the human condition, and how you think the arts, you know, in terms of film and drama and literature, can help us understand some of the complex challenges we're facing, you know, from a political and economic, and a social perspective. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, and also for my people from Kinshasa, in Congo. I will tell you Mbote too. You know, meet someone Mbote, and so it's great to be here. Thank you really for the opportunity. So, as a filmmaker, as an artist, why is it so important to make movies, and especially the format of cinema is the art where you have the stories of people, you have the big narrative, but you also have the individual. You have the little guy and you have the bigger guy. And over, let's say, 1 hour and 30 minutes, you can give someone a perspective of a soul, because that's what the audience gets. You know, they get to, you know, they watch a movie, action, love, and it's gone. But the reason why a movie will stay for 30 years, you know, because it speaks straight to the memory. It speaks to that place where our childhood, where our dreams, you know, where the references of, I will say in African term, our ancestors or the grandparents. That's the mythology, right? The film, what I really like about the film, I like reading, I like, you know, all kind of things, writing and everything. Theater is great. But the difference is that cinema is really that format where anybody in the world, you know, who can have $5, $10, they go watch a movie, 2 hours, it's great, and they're happy. Theater is more expensive. Opera is, all these other guy book you need to be able to read, right? Yeah. All these other things, and so cinema doesn't have that. So when it comes to Congo, when it comes to my really formative years, the reason why you become filmmaker is very individual. You know, it's really linked to your personal history, and it's linked to all the things that happens to you. What I think young filmmakers, and especially for their first film, when I have my international breakthrough, right? I have my first feature film doing well, and then I open in New York. You know, I'm here at the Angelica, you know, the mythical cinema, and say I'm here. And, you know, that's the movie I made with my guys in Kinshasa, right?
Right.
Who come from Congo, right? We made
Right.
all this journey to go. That's when I thought about my mother. Because my mother, you know, born in 42 in Congo, you know, under colonialism, and they could only study until the age of 14, 15 for a woman. Okay. So after independence, when she had the sixth child, which was me, she went back to school. And so she educated herself. So when I was a kid, I watched a lot of movies. Because, well, you know, I arrived in Europe, I was 9, you know, because in those years you send someone to Europe to study.
Sure.
And so I had a mother, when I came back from the boarding school on the weekend, she sent me to cinema. I watched a lot of movies because, well, I have nothing else to do. And Europe of those years, and especially where I studied, was not an open place. So you went to boarding school, you went back home, but home we were Congolese, right? So you go out to the cinema, so I watched a lot of movies.
Right.
And so I am standard Congolese, born into middle-class families in the 70s. And then, you know, you had some means, but they saw the system was not working. So you were sent to school in Europe, to boarding school, like in the Middle Age. You know, you're going to send to become men and you come back. So that's the kind of like how it started. So from that classic, let's say, system education, you remember 1985 when, you know, people talk about the IMF, you know, the drastic measures that have killed the south of the world.
Right.
It means that people, middle class, you know, who have some regular money, suddenly they became broke. So that's what happened to me, to friends, people of our generation, is that suddenly that measure that, oh, we're going to fix Africa, which basically says like, oh, you're going to cut the public services, you're going to cut all these other things. Teachers have no money anymore. You know, there is no credit. There is no, let's say, that social security that allows a society to work. So we changed social classes, you know. So I came from a Congolese standard studying economy because there was only economy, law, and doctors. That was the vision of those years.
Right.
And I went back to my inner feeling, the inner story. Right. And so I studied fine arts and for 5 years. And then after that, I had a second crisis because that's the thing. About film, you have a personal calling. Mm-hmm. When I was I didn't see myself in the future when I studied art. And that's when someone told me, whispered to me, you should go to a film school.
Wow, that's a tremendous story, and you know, I think what you do in film too is you give people agency, because you know when you look at broad problems, it's statistical. You don't understand the human dimension, and then you don't understand people's ability to affect their future. You know, and your films depict the DRC as a really complex place and illuminate it in, I think, a brilliant way. And so what I'd like to do is ask you to share your just overall assessment of like the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Congo, which you depicted brilliantly in your 2010 crime thriller Viva Riva. But before we talk about the bad and the ugly, first let's start with the positive. Can you help us understand the potential of the Congo? And I'm thinking in particular, you know, the youth, its rich resources, especially in, you know, the minerals and so forth. But what are the opportunities and possibilities, do you think, for growth and education? You know, of the, you know, the country's, you know, it got 110 million people, primarily very young people.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. Resilience.
Yeah.
Resilience. If there's one word about the Congo, resilience and wealth. So our positive story is that our history was ugly. We were that country we had the worst colonizer, you know, with like a friend of
Leopold
mine.
II. Yeah.
Leopold II from Belgium, who was a frustrated person, who didn't have an empire. He saw the British have a big empire, the French had one, the Portuguese, and he wanted something for himself. He was an ugly person, so he organized the looting. So over 100 years, because the problem of Congo, when he talks about, you know, geopolitics, is that once you start an administration in a certain way, it takes a lot of time to change it. The philosophy of looting that Leopold implemented, that administration that is harming the country, well, it has continued after independence with Mobutu, and it took another war in the 1998-2003 to stop. So now the Congo is at a place where they start to find themselves. That's where resilience comes in. That's where all these young people come in. I talked about my feature films, right? We're talking about $2 million movies made in Congo. But you know, when I started my company 7 years before, I had $20. Yeah. So these are the guys, you know, the Congolese, the assistant, the guy, the taxi driver. All these guys made it possible. That is the, you know, when I discuss with people, you know, big investors say, yeah, your country is bad, it's out of darkness. It is true, okay? We had an ugly past. But our future is still there. We have a lot of young people. When we talk about education, is that the first thing I've done is I've put money into education. I put money into the belief of people. You lose at the beginning, for sure, you know. But then after, people are stabilized. You know, education, what it does, it stabilizes people. It starts to give them the when they're young enough, right? After a certain age, it's too late. But when they're young enough, when you stabilize people, it gives them the belief, you know, to create a system of thinking where I can make it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the only thing. And the proof of my movie, because when I was writing my first feature film, my worry was, okay, I'm going to make a film where I'm sure that the Congolese get it. You know, the Africans get it, not this intellectual theorist and all. I read a lot of philosophers. I read, like, you know, I watch these very special movies and nobody. That is me as an audience. But as a worker, I had the feeling that the Congolese, the African, need to understand first. And actually, I use a genre film because it's crime, but it's also money. It's also capitalism and socialism. You know, things that don't work for us. Yeah. We have been falling between the two and being enemy of everybody in the past. You know. Yeah. And for me, it was to show how ultra-capitalism doesn't work. Too much money, but too much aggression, too much everything driven by the profit. It doesn't work. So the balance, the human balance, doesn't work. It's destructive. I made the movie in that sense, and I was surprised that it actually got the international success. Yeah. What I understood when I had the buzz at Toronto Film Festival, because you go there with your first film, you're just happy to be there. Yeah. And then, we can't feel like it. Oh, this American, but in 4 days we sold in so many countries. And actually, I understood that the genre film allowed people to understand us.
Yes, yeah.
And the Congolese, they also understood, the rest of the world is watching us. That's that dynamic. That's where the business is. That's where, you know, the potential for the minerals is huge. Is about education. Is about the people they're hardworking people. They do incredible things. They have hyper resilience, but they don't have the benefit of a system. Mm-hmm. They don't have the benefits to have their energy being monetized. I'm going to give you a practical example. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a producer too. So when I was working in Kinshasa, one of the most hardworking people were taxi drivers. Yeah. They work countless hours. Kinshasa is an impossible city. And you know how much they earn, you know, for people doing like 14 hours, 16 hours a day? They earn like $100 a month.
Wow.
And I said, are you serious? Yeah, this is like $100 because they have to pay the fuel here, they have to pay the policeman, the corruption. But then the owner of the car is like, you know, a bit like a slave owner, a little bit, you know? Sure. And so they work. And I say to those guys, you know, if you produce, your logistic is the strongest part, you know, the car, the people working for it. I say to those guys, look, if I hire you, okay, and I pay you $400 a month, will you work for me? Say, 400? Doing what? Say, you know, in the morning, you have to start early. You drive the actors, you pick them up, you bring them on set, you know, and after that, you go buy a few things, and you stay there. And you wait until they finish, and you go back, you bring them back. Say, 400, we're good, we're taking it. Right. You see, those guys were really the key to my success, because I could lower the cost of production, not going to Earth, not bringing 50 Europeans like I've seen some other colleague, 100 actually. And then actually, the great stories, like those guys, they bought their houses.
Yeah, right.
They called their houses the Viva Riva houses. Like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
because
great.
Actually they see, we have an opportunity for 4 months.
Yeah.
You know? And so that makes enough to buy a house or to buy another car and to become businessmen themselves. Yeah. That is my favorite story. The potential is there. People are there. Okay, you know, the education has not been working until now. But you invest now, give people a bit of time, you stabilize them, they're going to deliver. This works for the taxi driver, it will work for the mines as well.
Right. It gives people back agency, it gives them back hope. And you know, of course, you know, there is so much potential. I mean, you mentioned how just a little investment sparks a business opportunity, allows a person to buy a home. The U.S. State Department has called the Congo the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa, obviously, home to an estimated $25 trillion in mineral reserves, and the Congo basin, rainforests and peatlands that serve as they call it the world's second lung, right? So tremendous natural resources. But your films demonstrate that mineral wealth has turned out to be as much of a curse, right, as a blessing, maybe even more, due to corruption, weak institutions, and the degree that avarice, right, drives violence. And I think since 1885, right, every conflict in the Congo has been driven by some extent, by conflict over access to minerals, right? And in Viva Riva, your character Nora, she says, in this country, you think money is everything. You know money is like poison. In the end, it always kills you. So, can you talk about how you use the film to understand the root causes of conflict in the DRC, how you see the root causes of conflict today?
Look, I agree. The $25 trillion, all is great, etc. Okay, and the U.S. State Department, they are right. But where is the program? You see, that's the problem. The problem. Viva Riva was really about the effect. It's not a movie about where it comes from, the ugly part. The problem with DRC in all its potential is that the relationship with America has not been at the best. Yeah. That is the main problem. Okay, let's start with the Belgium. Okay, the kingdom. He got that Congo. He had that big slice, and first there was the rubber, so he could deliver a lot of rubber for the Western industry, right? So he made a lot of money. Millions of people died, and the violence, the brutality. This was terrible. And then came the Second World War. Belgium provided uranium for the bomb. Okay, the mine in Chikolombwe came from the Congo. So you had the colonizer who could talk to the Americans. Oh yeah, we can provide you with uranium, and they did, okay. And so which made the Belgium the kind of like the super ally. But the problem is they don't look at what the super ally does. Yeah. At the same time, they can provide the uranium, they can provide all type of services, but their behavior was terrible. What happened is that you have Patrice Lumumba, who is not seen as a hero on this side of the world for many misunderstandings. In 1957, when he goes to Ghana, and he sees the other Africans, they came from England, from the French, they were educated. They were people of manners. They had studied. They went to university. He was shocked because the Congo was like a prison.
Right.
The colony was like a prison and continued a little bit after. And so a guy like Lumumba, who had a really short period, I don't think he thought about left or right because it didn't exist and still do not actually most in the country. And so then you have the tragedy is that he wins the election, he is elected, but like he doesn't control the political landscape, he didn't know.
The system is entrenched, basically.
The Cold War has started, the system were entrenched, but actually nobody knew. And so he said things from his heart that make them sense, and then he was killed. And then we had the dictatorship, which was basically you take someone violent, very violent. He's sure to be, to provide the access, and with the Belgium, and it's all that's it. And so all the potential that could have been built over 50 years, 70 years, you talk about the institution, but it's also the school, it's also the people, it's also the security, it's also to let people create the business. Didn't happen.
Right. Right.
And so that's the $1 trillion. Yes, we want the business to grow. Yes, everybody wants to make money. Yes, but then people want to feel safe.
Right.
You don't want to say something. Oh, the American don't like it. There's some assassin that comes to you. Yeah. You see, that's the kind of that relationship. I hope it will change. Yeah. And it is complicated because people make it complicated. Yeah. It could be simpler. Right. We don't kill anybody. Yeah. We play by the rules, okay? And the rules are there, people will come.
Right, right. And the sad part, I think, is in authoritarian regimes that emerged in the DRC,
yes.
Of course, what they prioritize is staying in power,
Of course.
And the way they do that is not by making people's lives better, it's by controlling their life choices, right? Telling the people stories that only they can save them. They rob people of kind of their agency to build a better life, and they need the cash flow, right? And they need the security forces, and they become almost like a new form of oppression, a post-colonial form of oppression that now DRC is struggling with, kind of even a new form now with other actors involved.
The first time we talked, we talked about, post-colonialism, what is post-colonialism, what is the corruption, what's the relationship? But that's that. The post-colonialism is basically some guys who are in power because they have access. Well, once you start with the first crime, let's say you steal power, you steal someone's wife, you threaten somebody else, let's say your nightmare starts because you're always afraid of the next guy. You're always afraid that something may happen. Yeah. So you attack other people, you kill other people. But then actually, I think those guys, once they're in power, they don't know when they cross the line. Yeah. There is a day where it's just too far. So I'd rather kill those guys. I'd rather eliminate them. Right. So you see, that's the kind of, that's that place where, the corruption and this authoritarian regime and the sense of what they perceive as security, it's terrible. So the world of the dictatorship, the Zaire, was a world of psychopath.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I mean, when you were afraid of even people, member of your family, you were really scared because you didn't know who you were talking to.
Right. Right. They use fear. They fear themselves. They're fearful
themselves. They fear themselves.
And they use fear as a mechanism of control.
Exactly.
And it's
the violence.
It's this combination of fear and avarice, And
yes.
Hey, this is of course, Congo has internal issues to cope with in terms of governance and corruption and rule of law and so forth. But also, it's in a difficult place, right? I mean, DRC borders 9 different countries, right?
Yes.
And there are many regional dynamics that are perpetuating violence. I'm thinking about the war in the East. Can you maybe share with our viewers your assessment of some of those regional dynamics and how they're affecting people in the DRC, which has a massive internally displaced population as a result of the violence?
Yes.
In the Great Lakes region, for example. So
yes. Well, look, the problem is that the 9 borders are an opportunity. You could do great business with everybody. You have great language, that's great wealth. But then the problem is that wealth is not used properly, and in a sense that, the war in the East, we have a neighbor, Rwanda, who has a powerful army. Because, sometimes history create people where, he was in a refugee camp himself, that group that went to fight in Uganda, since they were kids, we're talking about people took arms at 12, 13. Yeah. And then after there was the genocide and they took power in Kigali, and they were young. There were many of them. They had that mentality of being super military.
Yeah, in fact, we did a Battlegrounds conversation with President Kagame, which you're going to give an opposing view to, I'm sure.
Yes, but I'm not giving an opposing view. I'm giving, let's say, I'm a filmmaker, right?
A different view, a different perspective.
A general narrative.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, is that first, they start, we're going to attack the refugee camp in Goma because the Hutu refugees were there. They were threatened for an attack. But then you attack, and then it says, that army is not there anymore. And the population says, you come to free us. Yeah. Then they walk to Kinshasa, they take power, But that's the thing. That's the moment when you discover wealth, and then you have people, you have a movement. Who do you control?
That's right. And it becomes like a wartime economy, right? Because people are benefiting from the perpetuation of violence.
Exactly. And then comes this thing, at some point say, we have too many problems, guys, thank you. We're going to start rebuilding. They go and they don't go. Say, we're going to take that cake, right? Yeah. That's the beginning of your war. And then you say they come back and we're going to organize rebellion. We're going to put your slogan, says, we're going to defend the Tutsi. Okay, that's the slogan. And that's the thing, is that you have, a group of heroes that transforms into a gang, let's say, and it becomes violent and it becomes looting. Where the international market comes in, you have the cell phone, around the 2000. And then you have Colton, in Congo, a lot of them. Well, and then the market says, bring us the goods. Yeah. We're going to pay you. But you see, that's how you fuel the war. Say, I'm going to send, a few thousand, you organize a rebellion, you attack the mines, you control the roads, you start to export, You send it to Asia, Thailand, transforming, and it enters in Canada, okay, and it's clean.
Yeah.
That is the war in the East, one part of it, all right? And so you enter a cycle of violence where there is no control, but we repeat history. And the problem of DRC now, and the problem of wealth, and the problem of money, is that we have to stop repeating history.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. The only thing is you have to stop repeating history. Even today, it has went too far. All that region could have become California.
Yeah.
With the same player,
Right.
you know,
Right.
with the same guys, oh, you organize this, you do that. It could have become California. And then it became that place you have millions of displaced people, the rape victims,
Yes.
okay, all these women raped. It started with the rebels. It started with the military. It started with guys attacking a city in Bukavu. And you say, oh, we're going to spread terror. So people fear us. What you're going to do, you have your rebels, so to speak. They enter houses. They beat up the father, the son, you know, the girls on one side. They put the father on the ground. They put a mattress on him. And then they're going to rape the daughters on his back.
Yeah.
You see? That's the kind of like, you know, you start, oh, we're going to spread terror. And then they don't stop there. They start stabbing, you know, women and it's kind of like. What it does happen, it says, oh, they're going to fear us now. But then you don't control it anymore.
Right.
You know.
And you lose, you debase people. You lose their humanity, you know. And
So.
I mean, those who are the criminals, these horrible criminals and terrorists, you know, and then they systematically dehumanize the youth, right? In terms of kind of industrial-sized child abuse, you know, and create another generation of people who have lost their humanity. And then, of course, the victims are traumatized. I want to ask you about this, because one of your films is extremely powerful on collective trauma and mental health. And I'm talking about State of Mind, your film State of Mind.
Yes.
And you reflect on the millions of people, right, who've been killed in the last quarter of a century, right? And one of your interviewees said, the history of our country is like stitching that can easily unravel through successive violence. And could you share your thoughts about how to maybe begin to overcome this trauma, to begin to maybe restitch, you know, the stitching? How do you see a path forward out of this kind of cycle, you know, of violence and trauma?
Look, you know, I mean, about this thing, if you start to look at it, oh, I'm going to fix it all, you'll be overwhelmed, you know. And in these things, I look at it from a perspective about as a filmmaker. It says, okay, I'm going to look at trauma, I'm going to make that movie. I'm going to make that documentary. Yeah. First, you start by people talking. Because people who are traumatized, they first need to have their story out. The story I talked about, the father who, the daughter was raped on. It's one of the first story I recorded in 2002 and 2003, you know, the rape phenomenon. I mean, you have been a general yourself, right?
I've fought some of the same kinds of people, Al-Qaeda in Iraq and ISIS and so forth. Yeah.
But when someone who's traumatized start to tell their story because he was in the dark, the energy, the vulnerability, it's terrible. You feel it, you feel the pain. Yeah. And so there is the pain. And then starting to stitch is first start to have the story out. That's the first thing, is that once people start to tell their stories, we start to record it, we start to recognize that you have been hurt.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. You recognize that you have been hurt and we start to work. That is the only way, you know. And when I talk about education, it's not about, we're going to have teachers and then, they go to school. There's that part as well. But you also need to have healers. You also need to bring all the, psychiatrists, all the people who put narrative into perspective. Because my personal view about the Congo, it's true that we had 2 decades of horror and we had 100 years of colonization, but it's okay. It's just one small thing in a long, long history. Because out of that trauma will come as well a lot of strength, will come new ideas. People, I'm not negative about the Congo, absolutely not. Because from 2001, I started working there in 1999, the worst I've seen was 2001, 2003, the war and the rape system and the rebellion and all these other things. That was the worst. 15 years after, I was able to have a paper from Kinshasa, I was traveling with a crew of 2 Westerners in the car. Mm-hmm. From that paper, I could take a car from Goma go to the north, and go east again to Kisangani. 1,600 kilometers where you could show a paper to the soldiers, they look at it, say, okay, you can go. That was the beginning of the state, you know. And so, that's when you say, oh, because 15 years before, they will come back and I'll be afraid, and I won't even take the car. But you can have that, and you have the Chinese roads as well. It's complicated, but it's happening. But you also have all these businesses in the west, next to the harbor. It is growing. So I call it's chaotic.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
It's chaotic. And so your trauma or fixing the trauma is coming to bring a little help here and there.
Right, right. And the words you said at the beginning was resilience, right? And,
resilience.
And you show in your film the resilience of individuals.
Yes.
I mean,
exactly.
one of the things an aspect of this is that it's fascinating how, not fascinating, it's concerning and an element of post-traumatic incidents like these and crimes is that the victims blame themselves, right? And they become
exactly.
despondent. You have to make it clear this is not your fault, and you can overcome
so
this.
The self-harming, okay, the other word for corruption, okay, for the moment, the Congolese population, the institution, even the big guys who are in charge, they are self-harming. That's the thing. Okay, I'm gonna steal. You steal money, right? Okay, you have it at home, three of your guys. But these guys, if he has an attack, because the dream is that, I'm gonna fly to South Africa to go to the hospital, I'm gonna go to Europe, but he won't even reach the airport, Right. He will die there. So people are self-harming for the moment, collectively and also individually. And so the healing process, is also the healing of the administration. They say, we have to build institution. Yes. But what is the meaning of institution? Because if we say institution, the EU has signed in February, a treaty with Rwanda, where Rwanda will provide
for the refugees, for the
the minerals.
Oh, the minerals. Okay.
The minerals.
Yeah.
So which means that you legitimize the 20 years of hurt. That hurt.
Right.
Okay.
And the minerals are not in Rwanda.
No,
right?
there are no minerals, not on that
Rwanda,
scale.
Which is
I mean, Amnesty International, they have the first report of plundering of Congo in 2003. An institution as well. It says, these guys they are plunder, they are killing, they are violence. They do that, okay? 20 years after, we sign a treaty so they can... You see the enablers, the question of the enablers is also at that level, So we need to find a new word, We say, institutions, but these guys, they hurt me. No. You need to stop self-harming. You're going to create a system where collectively you are like around this table, where you share the wealth with everybody, and you're going to be wealthy.
Right.
That is what is missing for the moment.
Well, this is a really important point. I think one of the projects we're working on here is how to use finance, how to use commercial relationships to promote freedom, and the rights of people, rather than to reinforce systems that are oppressive. And I love your thoughts on that, but also your thoughts on what is effective, aid, and what is what one critic has called dead aid, or aid that doesn't help at all. And I'm thinking in particular, and something that I think Americans are justifiably proud about is the PEPFAR program, which is the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS relief, which has now morphed into a much broader health assistance program.
Yes.
That is, it's gone after a range of diseases. AIDS, obviously, or HIV, tuberculosis. Recently Mpox, right? And so can you maybe comment on what you've seen that's effective, what's ineffective from an aid perspective, but also from a financial investment, commercial perspective? What harms and what helps?
Poor HR. You are sensitive with the artists. I love those guys, but at the same time, I'm a military. I'm my friend. I'm not an aid friend.
You're not an aid friend.
Does it work?
No, it doesn't work.
Does it work?
No, I think some
the
programs
money works, all right? We agree about exactly.
Right. No, I'm thinking. There's also a great book called Aid for Elites, by Mark Moyar, who's a colleague here. So I mean, I'm skeptical about it. I think a lot of it's wasted. I think it's it doesn't focus on objectives and evaluate itself on objectives. So I don't know. I was using PEPFAR as a positive example, as a balance against the negative.
Let's be clear. Money coming into a country, it is good. All right. Now, at some point, you talk about efficiency. Efficiency is the story of the taxi driver I told you about. It says,
Yeah.
okay, you work hard. You have proved yourself 100 times. You don't have to prove to me anything. You know,
Yeah.
I give you money.
That's like microfinance almost.
Yes.
Yes.
I give you money. Okay, you work, and I'm gonna have more.
Yeah.
He doesn't trust me. It's like, hey, you're gonna have more. You know.
Yeah.
And then he works. He makes more money, and he takes the next job. Okay, that works because that money goes to him, to his wife, to the kids, to the school, everything. That one works. All right. And then you do that with bigger scale money, with people that will work. So the problem with AIDS, all right, the money is good, but you know, I mean, these NGOs are nice, huh? Some are
No,
really,
I agree with you. Hey, listen, I've seen. I was in Afghanistan, right?
Yes,
where aid flows,
Yes.
right, far exceeded the absorptive capacity of that economy.
Yes.
A lot of it went through these so-called implementation partners, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And their metric was, this is really, they called it the burn rate of aid. Well, I mean, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to reinforce these criminalized networks and so forth. So, you know, so what you're saying is, and I want to hear more of your thoughts on this, to be effective, right, it has to affect the lives of the people the lives you're trying to improve, not go to the elites, not just flow into the economy in a way that maybe encourages organized crime.
There are two things, there are two components that are missing into whatever aid. You cannot take away someone's dignity and thinking that he's going to perform after. It's impossible.
Right.
You know, it is impossible. So the taxi driver, he comes with his broken car. I'm not saying, oh, now I'm going to put you into a nice, great car. No. That big money, it's for what you have. Yeah. He builds his dignity. And to be sure that he doesn't forget, he buys himself a house.
Yeah.
You know, after we never. So you see, the aid and the NGO, there was a guy, they have created kind of like a super class, you know. They want to mimic the elite. I'm not against the elite. A guy who works hard for years, for generation, you know, you become an intellectual elite or become an intellectual in the bank system. Yes. He has worked, you know. That is one of the things. And then the second thing is that, you know, what we admire about America, okay, is that, of course, we look a lot at African Americans, right? They had a terrible history, ugly start. But at the same time, we still think that African Americans are doing good. Yeah. They are progressing because they are next to the best Westerners in terms of Caucasian. Yeah. The American system is complex. It's not perfect. There are things that don't work. But you cannot say that people do not thrive. It's not perfect. But if you have talents in Miami and I see it here and I say, I'm going to send you money, you do this, he will do it, and we sell it in New York, he makes profit, money goes back to him. Yeah. Plus the system. That you don't have. What you have is this clique, not elite. They're going to take, I'm going to have my black guy or Afghan black guy. The drug dealer mentality. There is a nice essay by a British intellectual. He talks about the drug dealer mentality. Yeah. So instead of like hiring the black guy who works hard, they're going to hire the black guy who brings them drugs, you know. He's my guy. He's my buddies. You know? Yeah. So by doing that, the hard-working guys who wakes up at 4 in the morning, you know, go for 16 hours of work, at some point, he's demoralized. Yeah. Wake up at 10. Right. He start drinking at 1. Right. That is the problem of that. It's not the money, you know. Yeah. Send the money, but the selection, but also these, because, I agree. And the guy, the white supremacist and the American, okay, let's talk about the European, the soft white supremacist. Because there are different ways to be a white superior, guys, you know. Yeah. You know, the way you talk French, how you lower people, you know, the way you want to be British and drinking your tea in a certain way and talking to people, talking down, you know, all these other guys. I mean, HR, you have been in the military. Yeah. Who's going to go and fight to die for a country? Someone with pride and heart. Absolutely. Because he believes. I mean, if you have to go and fight for those guys, you want to die here. Right, absolutely. Yeah, there's a saying, like, you don't fight for what's in front of you, you fight for what's behind you, right? Exactly. And you know, I'll tell you, your film, one of your films, I mean, I think it's sort of, it seems like The Great Gatsby to me, man, because nobody comes out of it well, right? And it's because of the hours. I'm talking about like the smuggled fuel scene, you know, and how, you know, this generates, you know, this interaction between characters in the film. Yes. That is based on just, you know, as you're saying, like, instead of, you know,
they did lose their pride, right? I mean, they lost their sense of pride.
Yes.
And they got mired in the criminality. Can you maybe talk about that film in contrast to what you're talking about with the taxi driver who now, based on your hiring of him, is building a better life?
Look, I'm talking about people of my generation. Okay,
Yeah.
those I've seen before and those I can see laterally. It says, well, if you survive, you make it, you will be good. But many of them, they may look nice, right? You can see the guys build, great house. My brother, for example, really nice guy, really, a moderate conservative person. We were together in Belgium and we made it, and he went back to Congo. He has a big house, a beautiful house. But at the same time, we can't even discuss about it, but I can feel that he's consumed inside. You see it? Even if you have all these material, thing, I can see that, well, all, me included, and all guys of our generation, there was a lot of drinking.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a lot of alcohol. Right. There was a lot of things that will be, at the end of the day, will reduce our life. Sure. And same for me. When I go to Congo, I go all these other things. Why? In the countryside, is to be able to tell the story. Because I have the dream that, one day I'll be able to say, oh, I'll get enough data. I write one narrative, maybe less one movie, and that's it. But you see, that's this idea that as long as the system is as it is, right, we won't live long. We won't survive. But what we start to have with the taxi driver is that it's also that idea that you're going to leave, the person who come behind you, after you, will do better. Yeah, right. That you see as well. I admire the guys, my brothers, some of their friends, all the money, they send their children to Canada, to the US, to better their life. So that's the thing. Well, I'm not sure it will work. I'm not saying it will work, but that is where we are now, because there is no other strategy. There is no other possibility.
And what you're talking about it has to come from within, right? But also they have to be reinforced, right, with yes, what's happening outside, so that there are positive rather than negative influences. And I'd like you just to talk about like the outside influences on the DRC today. And what I'm thinking about in particular are those that contribute to corruption, state weakness, right? We see this broadly in Africa. I mean, look what the Wagner Group has done in the Maghreb, like five coups in a row and so forth. But in Congo, you already mentioned the Chinese investment a little bit. But what we're seeing, obviously, are a lot of Russian and Chinese private military companies that are now intertwined with local governments. And China is kind of displaced Belgium in the old days, in the exploitation of Congo's resources. And I'm thinking of, I don't know if you know Siddharth Kaur's book, Cobalt Red. It's about how the blood of the Congo powers our lives. It's about how critical Congo is. You mentioned, right? Rubber, right? Then uranium, then all these other minerals, cobalt now, right? And others.
Yes.
But he describes in this book like horrific working conditions of miners. And he says in his book, across 21 years of research into slavery and child labor, I have never seen more extreme predation for profit than I've witnessed at the bottom of the global cobalt supply chains. And so could you comment on that, and then maybe how President
Tshisekedi,
Felix Tshisekedi,
yeah.
How is his government and how are the people coping with this latest challenge? I think it's a challenge to sovereignty, really, right? Isn't it? I mean, from now China and Russia, who have displaced, a lot of the U.S. investment that was in there.
Yeah, okay, we're going to get to that, yes.
Yeah.
Well, look, first, to mention the book that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't read these books.
Okay.
When I read the
It's too depressing.
No, it's too bad, so to
bad.
speak. It's
because
bad.
They don't have the granular...
They don't serve the granular, but
yeah.
on the soul level, why would you talk about that without talking about the history, all right? And also the narrow view they give about China. Yeah. It's a complicated place, right? It's complicated. Look, the Chinese are who they are, all right? But at some point, there is zero money. There is nothing. And the thing is that this type of narrative, they don't talk about why there is no money. Why in 97, 98, nobody says, oh, we're going to talk, we won't deal with you anymore. We're going to punish you. That, we were talking about the white supremacists earlier, but that also mentality that has not been digested, we're going to punish you little black guys, so okay. You punish the guy and someone who's desperate will do anything. If you have a player who has a history to back that up, who has the engineers to back that up, you're going to say, you know what? We could have whatever $1 billion, we give them 5, and they're going to take it.
Right.
And they will. But out of these 5 billion, you have a bit of a road, you have a bit of infrastructure, you have the minimum where you see, for example, the woman in the market. Huh? You know, as a filmmaker, we film all day and we arrive often at night, 11 p.m. or 1 p.m. But you see the woman in the market, she's still there. But when in, let's say, European time, she was selling a candle, because that's where you go, we're going to buy a candle so we can sleep at the mission, at least we have a candle. She sells you a small Chinese lamp.
Yeah.
All right? I'm not talking about Kinshasa, I'm talking about deep inside.
Sure, yeah.
She sells you a little Chinese lamp. And so it's funny, there is no candle anymore. But you buy, don't you want to buy 2 or 3? Because they don't live long, and that's what Chinese do. Huh? They're going to sell you something that will die quickly, yeah? I say, well, I'll buy you 3. I'll buy you 10. The rest, thank you. You see? But she's making a profit.
Yeah.
What I see about the Chinese, when we were really deep where hell was just, there, they were there.
Yeah.
Look, you see, that's the thing, is that someone who comes in this darkest time, you're going to forgive him so many things.
It's like a fire sale is what they've done. I mean, that's what they've done around the world, right? It's like, and you're right. I mean, what's the alternative? If there's not an alternative, right?
Yeah, from that part, there was this, we don't die today, okay? Yeah. Right. You live to fight another day. That's the kind of narrative. Yeah. And also there's this story, the Chinese are the new colonizer. No, the Chinese are the Belgian. Nobody can be as evil as the Belgian. Sure. It's impossible standard,
Yeah.
What you have is that you have a Chinese where, you are in the bus one day, they pick up the phone, they speak Lingala. You say, oh my God, they do. But the Europeans who have been there for 30 years, for 40 years, they can't even speak.
Yeah.
You see, these are the things that happen at the smaller level. And of course, at the higher level, you have players you can't control. Of course, you have all the bad things that do happen and everything. At the moment, the little guy, the 9-year-old boy who is he's in the mine.
The artisanal, what they call
the artisanal 40 million they're digging all these
underneath
guys.
their homes a lot of times.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That guy, you won't put him in school. It's too late, But what you can do, you can increase the wages, okay? So, complaining, there's institutions. Okay, that was the past. Today, he's a worker, okay? We look at the history of all these industrial countries. They have the 12-year-old kid, in the mining, everything, people die. He brings money to his mother. That's what they do,
Yeah.
The link to the mother I was talking to you about, it is real. That's maybe the only thing that is real, in terms of if you have so much chaos. So that is real. So, okay, that's day one. Okay, you make $9 a day, okay, and you eat for $3 and you and you drink for the rest. Okay, we're gonna make it $30 a day.
Yeah.
We're gonna legitimize the business, okay, and you say you are the businessman. Yeah. Oh, really? But if you make enough money, you can go back to school at 25.
Right.
Right. So starting from the utopia doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
Complaining and crying doesn't help anybody because the people on the ground, they don't care.
Yeah.
All right? You have money, you have power, show it. Okay? Come, build,
Yeah.
You compare my China, do like them. Do you know the mine? What's the name again? Tenke Funguhomwe mine?
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell? That big mine?
Yeah. Yes.
It was American.
This is the big one. The big one that
the super
the
big one.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It
was an American mine. Yeah.
It was an American mine.
That's right.
And they sold it to the Chinese.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's right. Hey, I agree with you. I can't tell you how many. Back when I was a national security advisor, so many African leaders would say, "Hey, the Chinese are affecting our sovereignty. We're not getting the full benefits," because they would complain about, kind of Chinese banks, making Chinese loans, hiring Chinese companies and Chinese workers, and then the wages going back, and crumbling infrastructure, whatever it was. But they would say, hey, this is a problem that we're dealing with, but we don't have an alternative. You're not giving us an alternative. Yes. So I think I think we did actually retreat from investment that could have been more beneficial in Congo and other places as well for a number of reasons. And of course, the Chinese, the vanguard for the Chinese is as a bank official with duffel bags full of cash for anybody who will take it, for the concession up front, so.
Yes, and also beside the money problem, okay, on the human level, there is something that impresses me about the Chinese. They send their best people, all right? Our institute, fantastic, all that. I built a film school as well, really say. But if I want to hire, your top guys to say, hey, can you come work 9 months in Congo? They're like, I have this. I mean, that's the thing.
No, and they're state companies too, right?
Yeah,
I mean, so
course,
they can just tell them to go. Hey.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah, right.
I mean, that's one of the problems is also at the human level. Yeah. I run a school, right? And so I need to bring teachers, from Western world because, well, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. The fantasy of the teachers in Congo, they have these Africans say, no, you can't be a teacher if you didn't train properly. If you didn't have certain things, impossible. But to hire people, how much you have to beg them, and how much it costs, and the kind of you see, and also we talk about dignity after, okay? But someone who takes away someone else's dignity is someone who has no good feeling. Yeah. Because if you like your job, when I leave, I want you to be big, good. That's what the dignity of work. You have also poor manpower coming from Western country, and they already start very low, and they come there and drinking the women with a lot of money, and then finally, it's them. You see, it's a different type of criminality. The stories I got from the Chinese, right? You have the guy says, "What are you doing there?" I said, "Well, he had a life, and then he was in the local Oxford, and it finishes, and then the father says, no, you go back there." And you say, really? Yeah. And so you have your top guy, they send him into the forest, right? And so it's okay. So you see, that's the kind of that intellectually the movement to send you competent people. They go, they work, they bring their competence. So you ask them to do other things as well. That is okay, that is part of you. But that's also that. Yeah. You see, that is where you say, all right, you're a good player. Yeah. The smart players. So the mind of Tenke Fungurume was American. Why they sold it to the Chinese? And now, the cobalt. We need to have access to cobalt. And now the Americans are pressing hard to say, we need cobalt now. And I suspect that the European Union, having this memorandum with Kigali about the mining, is to find, once again, an agent who's going to get the goods that you need, whatever what he does, and he delivers them to them. You see, that's the kind of there needs to be a shift in paradigm. I'm not the first one to say it. I'm not the only one to say it. So it has been said before, but the thing is that the other party doesn't change.
Yeah, well, I think also, we're just so late to the competition because, China's been pursuing this effort to get a lock on critical supply chains, the concept of the dual circulation economy where China can have coercive power over other economies but be insulated from any kind of economic disruption in response maybe to their aggression in the South China Sea or vis-a-vis Taiwan or whatever. So I think we're just behind in the game and we'll see how this evolves.
No, I don't think so. Look, the place is so big. There is so much potential. 26 trillion, it's too big for them.
That's right. So there should be alternatives, right? And
my view personally as a filmmaker, when I read all these stories and I talk to all these players, and that's where the background you talk about, film, the format, is that, I need to be in that place where I talk to everybody. Yeah. If I want to serve my public, if I want to serve my audience, I need to have everybody. Right. So the good and bad doesn't apply. But then when you see this player says, well, how does he play that well? But the game could be, it's so large that actually everybody could play.
Yeah, and I love just the fact that how as a filmmaker you go right to the human experience. The lady with the lamps. The child. Sadly, who's involved in artisanal mining, but the effect that has on the family. And so I think it is always a much more complicated picture than these macro trends that you see. What I'd like to do is just ask you more about life in the DRC. Like in your films, they show the multifaceted of life. The joys, the challenges, the dynamism.
Yes.
It's kind of like the poetry of life. As you describe it in your hometown.
Yes, exactly.
And so could you maybe tell us more about life in Congo and how you've tried to capture it on film.
The problem, if I tell you the truth, is, oh, you won't believe. Or your audience says, oh, he's making things up. Oh, he has been paid by the president to come and say, like, look, you know, Congo is a great place. I have a lot of admiration for my compatriot. I have a lot of respect for even the drunk policeman who doesn't do his job. But, you know, he asked me to give me a little bit. He doesn't threaten me, right? Yeah. It's different. People work, they invent things. But also, Congo is one of the safest places in Africa and in the world. You know, there is the war, okay, that's one thing. But then there is the city. And so when you speak to these really big players, you know, the European, those who can, they will tell you, oh yeah, Kinshasa is good. That place is safe, you know. And so that is that. You know, you have security, you have kindness, but also people want to live. Yeah. Because if you have a hard life like that, you won't go back home and be miserable. No, you go out, you drink, you have swagger, you live life with a passion. And it's fantastic, you know, it is great. So I've lived that life. You know, but at the same time, you know, talking about my mother, you know, I'm also a responsible person. So at some point you start to work, you know, you start to read this important book, you start to build, you know, you start to look at the future. You also need to, that's the thing is that it is so extreme. You know, we suffer extremely, but the joy is also extreme, you know. And that's the thing is to find that balance when it becomes a society who lives in democracy, you know, who lives peacefully and people do business. Yeah. That's the kind of things where, you know, I wanted to capture, you know, as a kind of a picture of my time. You know, that's the thing. The picture of my time is that you had you lived hard, but also you had joy, and you have poetry, and then you have also the music. But it's one element, because actually, when I look at the movie, my perspective says, oh, there are all these other things I cannot talk about, because the format is limited. Sure. You know, yeah, if I go inside, when we talk about poetry, but the way people speak their own language, not Lingala or French, but, you know, really let's say the countryside language. The poetry, it's fantastic. Yeah. You know, that ability to kind of like talk about the universe, put words on things that you cannot really explain or understand, but that give you the path, that's what you have in Congo. Yeah. You know, yes. And you have plenty of that in the north and the south here. And so the question now is, how, before I go, because now there's a measure of time, is like, what do you create as tools for this to be the real wealth for people? Right. You know, yes.
Well, you know, hey, what's your next project? So what do you want to explain next through film? And what are your ideas that you're pursuing these days?
Wow. I mean, the problem and the joy is there are two things that comes at the same time. I'm still myself. I'm a filmmaker. I want to get up in the morning. I get up in the morning. I write. I go. I want to make my movie. That is one thing I want to do. But at the same time, you know, I need to invest in education. I need to build all these other things. You know, that comes like these two things. Once I've started that way, you cannot dissociate that. So on the film, you know, side, and I say, okay, the next film, you know, let's aim at an American movie. Bring an American movie to Congo. Right. You know, yeah. Right. Not in the studio in South Africa or in Morocco. No. You bring an American project in Congo. You know, you make it work. But you also bring these millions of dollars of investment. Okay. Yeah. Because you train people. You give an organization or generation the opportunity to work in a big organization. That works. You know? So I've been working on that for a few years, but maybe we are at the end. You know, maybe next year. It's happening, you know.
Well, I'll tell you, from your films, Kinshasa is just a fascinating place. I mean, it's unbelievable, the complexity, the vibrancy.
Yes.
You know, and I can imagine a major film being made there would be fantastic. You know?
That is where we're going, you know, and having that major film, you know, and be a larger scale, that will be really the next fascinating thing. Right. And on the other side, I am discussing with the government to build a film studio in Congo. Right. Oh, why? We have other priorities. Yeah, why? But look, the Americans export American films. The woman I mentioned, you know, with the candle and the little lamp, you know, when she has a bit of power, she watches an American movie. Yeah. And so, well, we can also produce, because the conditions are right, the money is there, you know, you can build an infrastructure. The content in the world, the need for content is so large that we have to enter that race.
Right.
Okay. You build a studio. If you build a studio, you need to build a university. And if you build a university, you also need to have a department to handle mental health and handle people. You create that, and then you have the hotel and you have the business. So your ecosystem, that is what I'm selling now to the government, because you can only do that with the government. This type of things for private investment or hedge funds is too complicated. But with the government, it's like we will not be the kind of like, we're going to be like the Europeans and then we're going to be like the Americans. Impossible. We cannot be that. We will jump straight into the future. Right. And so the jumping straight into the future is the infrastructure, is money, is education and training, and get going.
That's great.
Yes.
Well, I look forward to having you back on Battlegrounds to talk about that project. And Djo Munga, thank you so much for helping us learn more about Battlegrounds, important to all of our future, but also to learn more about the Congo and to learn how art can help us understand better life and humanity. Thank you for being here.
HR, thank you for having me. Really special. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Battlegrounds is a production of the Hoover Institution, where we generate and promote ideas advancing freedom. For more information about our work, to hear more of our podcasts, or view our video content, please visit hoover.org.